Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man? If I were rich, I'd have the time that I lack to sit in the synagogue and pray, maybe even have a seat by the eastern wall. And I'd discuss the holy books with the learned men several hours every day. That would be the sweetest thing of all, if I were a wealthy man. We are rich. We have a legacy from the elder brothers and Max Heindel. We have the Christ.
Do you want that higher?
What higher?
Your stand.
Your stand.
Mm-hmm. That would be good. Oh,
It's a comedy of errors. All right. Let's see when.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Max Heindel died at about 8 p.m. on January 6th of 1919. He had completed his work on Earth by the time he was 53. Most of this in the short span of 10 years. His final 10 years. The year 2019 is the centennial year of his passing. You and I and many others are now in the 101st year of enjoying his legacy. And I expect this legacy to continue to draw interest for many generations to come. This address, which is dedicated to Mr. Heindel, if it were a painting, would be an impressionist painting. And it's the one that I gave at the European Conference in Salisbury. Max Heindel was chosen to be the messenger of the elder brothers of humanity. They had determined that mankind was ready for a new dispensation, indeed had need of an elaboration, a supplement to what had been the new dispensation, that of the Christ and the biblical canon centuries earlier. The word dispensation draws various definitions depending on the source, but I'm going to use a King James quote from Ephesians, Paul's letter to the Ephesians. Having made known unto us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he hath purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. To me, this says that timing is everything. And when the time is right, he will bring forth whatever it takes by the intuition of his inner purpose to bring all together in Christ. Max Heindel brought a massive and intricate body of knowledge to us in simple language. And he wrote not in his native tongue, but in a second language. Most astounding was that, judging from the letter he wrote to C.W. Leadbeater, he had been an irreverent hedonist until curiosity prompted him to attend one of Leadbeater's lectures one fateful January evening in Los Angeles. I'm going to read the letter because although I am sure many of you are familiar with it, you will enjoy hearing it again. Mr. C.W. Leadbeater, Los Angeles, California, January 15th, 1904. Dear Sir, before you leave California, I desire to thank you for your lectures, all of which I have attended with great benefit to myself. Curiosity drew me to hear your first lecture. Your statement that every man had in him clairvoyant faculties, which I reasoned would benefit me personally, prompted me to attend. Your second lecture, in the hope of getting some information on how to develop this much desired and desirable power. And when in your second lecture you said that This faculty should not be used for selfish purposes. I sneered inwardly. What good would it do a man if he did not use it to his own interests? The next day, I applied for the astral plane at the library. That was the plane I wanted to find out about, where one could go and, with advantage to himself, learn other people's secrets. However, I did not get it. The librarian had none to loan or for sale. They were all out. But I got Mrs. Besant's Karma and Reincarnation, and when I had read them, I understood why occult powers must be used reverently as a help to humanity and not for personal gain. I saw that I had a place in this great cosmic scheme, and it seemed all so real to me that I needed no argument. I believed every word I read, and it was in a frame of mind very different indeed from what it had been at the first 2 lectures that I presented myself at your lecture on reincarnation. I have since then been literally devouring theosophy, and I have put it in practice in my life by discontinuing the use of intoxicants and tobacco, though I did not know until the other day that that was one of Buddha's precepts. But worse than that, I was a sensualist and a liar, and I never had any idea that I could help it, or that my thoughts did any harm, or that I could banish them. But when I found out that I could control my thoughts, I set out with a steady purpose and rejoiced to say that my waking hours are very nearly free from obscene thoughts. If I could but say the same of my sleeping hours, I would be happy indeed, but I have no doubt that by persistent effort, I shall soon have it entirely obliterated, especially as I have started a few days ago to live on a vegetarian diet after reading your argument in Glimpses of Occultism. I hope my long letter has not tired you, for long as it is, it does not cover 1/10 of what I would like to say if I could find words to express myself. It is wonderful I can scarcely realize it, that I, who thought myself a mere earthworm, living today and as I believed dead for all eternity when I died, that I am to live forever. Do you wonder that I feel grateful and feel the need of expressing my gratitude to you who opened my eyes to the high and noble destiny in front of me? Once more I thank you and wish you Godspeed. Yours truly, Max Heindel. That was 1904. There is a rumor. It's a rumor because I am unable to substantiate where the idea came from, and if Heindel actually said it. The persistent rumor claims that the elder brothers disagreed on the timing of the new dispensation. Should it be given as it was in the first decade of the 1900s, or should they wait another 100 years until the new millennium? Apparently, they were not fully in accord. We already noted that timing is everything, but consider the following comment by James Sherman, who became Vice President of the United States in 1909 and was the first Vice President to fly in a plane. A sensible plane, not the astral plane. He said, "You can't go back and have a new start, but you can start right now and have a brand new ending." I don't know if Mr. Sherman knew anything about elective astrology. Heindel's dispensation offered a new cosmic perspective on God's creation. It described where we are, our surroundings, and who we are in the vast reaches of time and space, how we got here and how it all happened. We learned that the natural law of cause and consequence puts us in the driver's seat to determine our own future and ultimately our outcomes. In short, the elder brothers and Max Heindel gave us good reason to reorder our values, to renew our purpose. What could be more important? the elder brothers decided to act before the end of the first decade of the new century, the 20th century. These are times of transition, as all times are, but in these times of rapid transition, it helps to have a glimpse of the big picture. This gives us a little advantage as we prepare ourselves for the changes that will soon engulf us, and it helps us to understand divine purpose. And, oops, looks like I can't. Carol, would you take those diagrams off of the board?
All of them?
Just the ones with the
These two?
geometric symbols?
Oh.
Yeah, because, yeah.
I can't reach it.
Oh,
Richard,
can you reach that and just,
Which one?
the geometric.
the geometric?
Got it?
I have
Hold
some-
gently, because there's
The
tape
bottom
on it.
is taped.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
I can hold it up.
Okay. Okay, do you know what they represent, these symbols? They came into my head. I don't know if I just remembered them from somewhere or if I came up with them, but anyway. Gender, race, and culture. And this diagonal line is the accepted line indicating transition. With transition, we have movement. In design, everything would get kind of boring if everything was at right angles. But when you have a diagonal line, it indicates or suggests movement. And when you have movement, you have time. So in order to have hindsight and foresight, you have to have vision and you have to have time. So movement or activity, nothing, nothing is static, everything is moving. Cosmically, spiritually, anthropologically, scientifically, and philosophically, Heindel answered our questions. All in one short course and in depth. One short course only if you skip astrology. If you decide to study astrology, which is an excellent way to learn about who you are and where you are, it's a lifetime study. In fact, more than one lifetime, I think. The year 1909 produced gigantic astrophysical events. In addition to the cosmological event of Heindel's writing and publishing, an expansion of the Christian dispensation, we have an aeronautical event from Wikipedia. In July 1909, the Wright brothers completed the proving flights for the U.S. Army, meeting the requirements of a two-seater flyer, able to move through the air with a passenger for an hour at an average speed of 40 miles an hour, 64 kilometers, and land undamaged. They sold the airplane to the Army's Aeronautical Division, U.S. Signal Corps, for $30,000. A lot of money in 1909, which included a $5,000 bonus for exceeding the speed specification. Wilbur Wright climaxed an extraordinary year in early October 1909 when he flew around the Statue of Liberty and up and down the Hudson River in view of 1 million New Yorkers. These flights solidly established the fame of the Wright brothers in America. Max Heindel climaxed an extraordinary year in November, just a month later, in 1909, when he produced not only the first 2,500 copies of the first edition of the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception, but also a second title, the Rosicrucian Christianity Lectures. Both only 5, I think maybe closer to 6, years after writing his letter to Mr. Leadbeater. If that isn't remarkable, when I have learned how short 5 years is, it's just amazing. He spent what must have been a grueling year of retyping, editing, lecturing, and traveling to New York, to Ohio, Chicago, and the West Coast. And that same year, on August 9th, 1909, at 3:00 p.m. in Seattle, Washington, he declared the birth of the Rosicrucian Fellowship. By the following spring, probably suffering from exhaustion, he became very ill and received his second initiation. Seattle, 1909, the birth of aviation, the birth of the fellowship, and the birth of the Cosmo. And so I think we want to keep the Max in the air, even the 737. So for you numerologists, consider the dates. After 1909, 1919 was the year of Heindel's passing. And in 1969, man set foot on the moon. All cosmic events, all in a year ending with a 9. Max Heindel and the elder brothers validated our biblical heritage and Christian teachings by broadening our perspective to consider the deeper and allegorical meanings of the scriptures. Perspective. He forever changed our perspective, helping us to look more deeply, to look below the surface, at the same time, giving us the big picture. This is where I wanted to show you the other things that I brought here, but I think it's okay. I've just got the shot of the moon, or of the Earth from space. It's called the Big Marble. And yeah, this is a small one, but there's a better one.
Right,
Back there.
but this one you can get from the picture.
Yeah, this is from the moon.
This rise from the moon.
Yeah, and there's, I don't know how to unhook this thing, but
Do you want the other?
yeah, that's a really pretty one. Ela's gonna be the technical assistance here. I hope we can repair your
The
screen,
tacks are
Richard.
down in the tray. Anyone grabbing
Okay,
chalk needs to
yeah, okay.
be alert.
So, if Max had not given us a new look at God's creation, the events of the coming century would have opened our eyes. From NASA, we now have what is known as the marble picture. We also have a perspective of the Earth as seen from the moon. And that's still out back there. We don't need to look at that. But the contrast is striking. The Earth is so beautiful and the moon looks so barren, you know. And so I'm going to quote Jeffrey Kluger. He wrote in the year 2015, "Earth can be forgiven its vanity. We may have long ago learned that our fly-speck world does not sit at the center of the universe, that it's a pint-sized planet in an afterthought solar system in an outer province of an ordinary galaxy. But say this for Earth, it's gorgeous. That loveliness is even more striking when pictures of the Earth are taken from the moon, with the bleakness of our only natural satellite contrasting sharply with the brightness of our home planet. And we might add, our home planet infused with the life spirit of the Christ." The Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, always presented a unified image to the public, sharing equally in the credit, and thus proving their nobility. Heindel honorably gave sweeping credit to another, stating in his first edition, dedication, "To my valued friend, Rudolf Steiner, in grateful recognition of much valuable information received." Wilbur Wright's father was an ordained minister of the United Brethren of Christ. Heindel was a triple Leo, another indication of nobility. Have you ever met a triple Leo? I don't know if I have or not. There's no way to know, usually. Ascendant Sun and Moon in Leo. Incidentally, one of the persons attending the 2019 European Rosicrucian Fellowship annual conference, European conference, asked me if I realized that the first day of this conference began under a triple Leo. I didn't. And he said, was that by intent? Because he was evidently new to the teachings. I replied that I didn't think it was by intent, but some things are just meant to be. But it was new moon, it was shortly after new moon, so that would be sun and moon in Leo. And at sunrise of a new moon, that makes it a triple. Because the sun and moon are both rising on the eastern sky. So, interesting. And I felt that through the whole conference. It was a beautiful experience. At daybreak on the first day of the conference, the sun and moon and Venus were all conjunct, the Leo ascendant, plus Mars was in the first house in Leo. So it was triple Leo plus Venus and Mars. It was amazing. If Heindel's father had been alive when Max died at the young age of 53, he might have written something like what Wilbur Wright's father penned in his diary when Wilbur died at the tender age of 45. He wrote, "A short life, full of consequences, an unfailing intellect, imperturbable temper, great self-reliance, and as great modesty, seeing the right clearly, pursuing it steadfastly, he lived and died." Our elders, be they Mr. Wright, or the elder brother, or Mr. Heindel, must be given credit, are always worthy, for they have given of themselves selflessly, altruistically. Lacking consciousness during most of his history, man developed more from forces outside of himself than from self-direction. But these honorable ones were not wasting time. Reading from the Cosmo, at the beginning of manifestation, God differentiates within himself, not from, within himself, these virgin spirits as sparks from a flame, of the same nature, capable of being fanned into flames themselves. Evolution is the fanning process. Remembering Mr. Wright's words, "A short life, full of consequences." Man having no consciousness or volitional activity during vast periods of time, and we're talking about 4.5 billion years, is what science now says, the age of the solar system, was almost entirely guided by the lords of Mercury and Venus, who had been stragglers on their own planets and had become moon dwellers for a time. In very recent history, several thousand years, a little different than 4.5 billion. Under Jehovah, races, tribes, and nations were formed with angels and archangels acting as race spirit guides. Man only gradually became and is still becoming conscious and self-directed, able to act willfully. Quoting Heindel on consciousness, in the second period, it rises to the dreamless sleep state. In the third period, it reaches the dream stage. And in the middle of the fourth, the earth period, at which we have now arrived, the full waking consciousness of man is attained. This is a consciousness pertaining to only the lowest one of the 7 worlds. During the remaining half of this period and the entire 3 remaining periods, man must expand his consciousness so as to include all of the 6 worlds above this physical world. So we have our work to do. Again, Mr. Wright's words, a short life, full of consequences. While the Wright brothers were building an airplane, there were a few others around the world who were doing the same thing. Epigenesis, that is a curiosity to consider those curious ones who were, when the clock started, bold enough to think that man could fly. I use this phrase a lot. I wear it out. Like mushrooms after a rain, new inventions arise simultaneously. New and original departures, not latent in them. And that's another topic for discussion, because that's a Heindel quote. New and original departures not latent in them, then how did they all think of the same thing and work on it at the same time, you know? As most of my friends know, I love aphorisms and collect them. There is a little puzzle in our daily newspaper called Crypto Quote. It's a favorite thing to do every day, figure out the quote of the day by solving a puzzle. You know, and sometimes it describes the day very, very aptly. 2 aphorisms from Heindel that might encourage quotation and discussion. Heindel said, wisdom is crystallized pain. Wisdom is crystallized pain. He also said, under the regime of Jehovah, egoism was instilled into early mankind to evolve humanity. God, it seems, has a sense of humor. What an ingenious plot. Divide Homo sapiens into groups, races, teams, to inspire competition, egoism, bigotry, fear, and even bloody wars. Put them all on the same playing field, a bigger and different arena and stiffer competition than they had ever encountered before, and then let them battle it out. Nobody gets a handicap. Let's use our imaginations for a moment, thinking macrocosm, microcosm, and starting with some facts. Heindel explained that there are 5 basic races on Earth. Science and the internet tells us that there are 5 vital organs in the human body. Repeating again from the Cosmo, at the beginning of manifestation, God differentiates within, not from himself, these virgin spirits as sparks from a flame of the same nature, capable of being fanned into flames themselves. Evolution is the fanning process which is to accomplish that end. In the virgin spirits are enfolded all the possibilities of their divine Father, including the germ of independent will, which makes them capable of originating new phases not latent in them. Phases, though, so that implies that originating things that have been brought to dispensation. I imagine, now this is imagination, that in the body of God, he calls for a liver and kidneys for purification and a heart for circulation, a brain and lungs, and Jehovah separates sparks into minor flames and produces liver cells, kidney cells, heart cells, archetypes to advance the microcosmic and macrocosmic grand plan, each having its unique specialization, its unique function in the body of God. So, in the physiology of nations and races, each has its systemic purpose. Some are good at circulation, some at assimilation, some at purification, elimination, reproduction. But they are all very good at war, fighting disease and invaders. Volition are the little sparks, not much in collective destiny. After the fall, instead of a sports handicap, there is the little miracle that follows altruistic action. Into this Armageddon, God sends the best he has to offer, his sacrificial lamb, his only begotten Son. And the Lamb of God tells us to love one another, to love even our enemies. We are all in the body of Christ now. It only takes a moment, but it takes an act of will to change direction. And when you're marching alone, it requires at least a moment of forethought. Knee-jerk reactions usually bring regret. The command now is for unity, back to spirit, about face. Ironically, the passing of a mere 100 years proved that Heindel was right in his description of the changes which would occur in this first epoch of the Earth period. The information he brought to us was accurate, and he proved it by being a man of his time in his writing. He proved it so thoroughly that today the biases of 1909 have become a problem, especially among pioneers and Aquarians. The elder brothers knew that acceptance of these concepts would not be immediate nor universal, and they would be misunderstood. And today we see strong resistance to diaspora, even among heads of state. We see the problems of Brexit. We see boatloads capsizing in the Mediterranean. It's no wonder that timing was considered crucial and became a serious question among the brothers. Did we think we were finished with it? With encountering those who are enmeshed in the fetters of race, clan, culture? We attach ourselves to race, to our group, so tightly that we are drawn back into it in successive births. We return to settle unresolved cause and consequence for lack of forgiveness. We literally would rather die than capitulate. Then negotiate. That puts us in danger of extinction. Astrologer Pam Gregory advises us to think of the past as a dream. We should leave it and all its baggage behind and move toward the future. That's another perspective. With our shrinking globe, there is going to be a blending of the races. The genome will change, is changing quickly. But everybody is not on the same page of this book. Matter follows spirit. We are told there is going to be a 16th race, then none. Everybody have one color and design. Let's inject a little humor. This is getting terribly serious. Step into the future a few years. On applications for employment under race, the box very often checked now is other. Let's find a word that will indicate the person of the future, an amalgamation from a melting pot. Until other is the majority, this person may have an identity problem, has lost his group, so he needs a name. I need to apologize here. I don't mean to be offensive, but I do want to be realistic here. So let's step aside for a moment. It's a diversion, but I think it's worth the side trip. Why do they even ask anyone about race? Why not ask for sun sign? If it is important that we and others know who we are, what is our brand name, Ford, Fiat, or Mercedes, then the natal chart and even the sun sign would tell the interviewer a lot more than race. Heindel advocated that everyone learn astrology, for good reason. As we individuate, it becomes more important to know ourselves and not to identify with whatever group that is going to give somebody a generalization about who we are. So back to the poor person who cannot claim any specific race on his employment application. There is a happy word. The word I'm thinking of means second chance. It also means stew or soup. It probably meant stew first after an Irish gentleman invented the stew that was made from leftovers. And his friends named the stew after him. Does that seem likely? Some of you can guess the word now. Or the guy was a duffer at golf, always missing the ball, so they usually gave him a second chance at a swing. And that second chance forever became a second chance. After the fall, and after the Elohim divided us, we get a second chance after we learn a few things and become wiser from coexisting with those not of our kind. This has been our challenge, our opportunity, in the first half of the fourth period, under Mars, the Mars half, to become wiser about coexistence. Stew, because there are many good things in a stew. Together, the variety of ingredients combine to create something more delicious than having, say, potatoes, right? The word, if you have not guessed it, is mulligan. That will, in the future, be the new word for a person of mixed race, which will become the 16th and final race of our Earth period, the fourth of 7 periods, if we survive. If we are still in the game after the first brutal half, the Mars half. Those who are among the last and final race may have the distinction of being called mulligans. And Heindel says, but after that, every thought and feeling of race will disappear. Humanity will again constitute one vast fellowship, regardless of all distinctions. Races are simply steps in evolution which must be taken. But they are also extremely dangerous ones and are therefore the cause of grave concern to the leaders of mankind. They call these 16 races the 16 paths to destruction. He says these changes are easiest while we are in our dense bodies. More difficult after we become more evanescent. I'm still thinking about that one and not entirely understanding it, but after we're totally evanescent, there won't be races. So perhaps he's just saying that us being divided in separate camps physically was important, was necessary. So mulligan, I think, has a happy sound because it's from the word that means second chance on a golf course. In the kitchen, it means a type of stew of Irish origin. meat, potatoes, vegetables, whatever else can be baked, scavenged, found, or stolen. Borrowed, gotten from Richard's garden. And some good medicinal herbs: parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. And of course, leftovers, survivors. Another common cliche: when someone is in a stew, it means he is agitated or bears a grudge. Sounds like a continuation of the first half of the Earth period, the Mars half. Ingredients in a stew, like rocks in a tumbler, get hot, but for good purpose. When all is said and done, we can take comfort that God instilled in us strong inclinations to socialize and to explore, to see what is around the corner. Ogden Nash said it best: one would be in less danger from the wiles of the stranger if one's own kin and kith were more fun to be with. I think that's one of my favorite quotes. The one thing that the Elohim did for us was enable each race and individual to develop special qualities which could be carried forward to enhance and complement the melange as the flavors in a stew. In the past, along with those specializations came weaknesses. The future race will be both hearty, full of heart, and merciful and aromatic. Aroma, mind. Therefore capable of spiritualizing the physical as invisible helpers. And this will not only unify mankind, but reunite humanity with the Christ, raising up all to dwell in mercy, in harmony, and in freedom. To summarize with some notable quotes, and we would like to call these maxims for Max. There's one by G.K. Chesterton, who is known as the English apostle of common sense. He said, "Children are innocent and love justice, while most of us are wicked and naturally prefer mercy." The future race will inhabit the earth, we hope, during the second half of the fourth period, the Earth period. It will be under the guidance of the Lords of Mercury, and we will be working on self-mastery as we become more individuated. We hope to be finished with the device of Mars. We have been guided toward consciousness, and we have gained freedom. Ogden Nash says, "You are only young once, but you can stay immature indefinitely." We know it's our choice to grow or know. From Albert Schweitzer, each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Albert Schweitzer said it, Max Heindel inspires it. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Thank you, Max Heindel. That's it, folks. And that's only 50 minutes.